Okay, dear friends, here's another one from my YouTube. In 2016, Bob Dylan got the Nobel Prize of Literature. And since I did not want to wait for his speech, I held one for my senior students in his stead. I will hold it in English first, and second then in German. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Colonians, I thank all the guests here for their presence, and I would like to speak about 3 issues in my speech. First, what is good poetry? Second, what is the role of music? And third, why do we need poetry and music? Before I start, allow me to inform you with a conspirative wink about the fact that it is quite ironic that I, the troubadour of the peace movement, wins a prize here that was donated by a scientist who felt morally guilty because he had invented a highly effective military explosive. To begin with poetry, ever since humans have been able to speak, have they discovered the magic of words. One example for this magic is the stylistic device of the metaphor, which often has been compared to a sublime tool that was forgotten in the human mind when it was created. A few striking examples for this are I met a young girl, she gave me a rainbow, or my love, she speaks like silence, or statues made of matchsticks, or the burning violin of my late colleague and friend Leonard Cohen. Looking at literary history, I do not come out of the blue. I zigzag left and right through the classics from the Iliad and the Odyssey over T.S. Eliot up to the French symbolists. Here's an album cover note from the record Desire. On the heels of Rimbaud. And on the heels of Rimbaud, I would like to quote some of his programmatic verses. The rhythm and the visions, the smoky veil of blue, the early morning turtle doves rising over you, they sing their songs of bitter love which will be here to stay, and all these things are hidden here, are burned and torn away. I know the skies exploding, I know the final dark, the early dawn arising, the nightingale, the lark, the currents and the sand dunes, the crashing waves on rocks, and I have known the dreamers, the raven and the fox. These are lines from Rimbaud's Le Bateau Ivre, The Drunken Ship. Very important, very good poem. 19th century France. Just like Arthur Rimbaud, I love the provocative oxymoron, the daring metaphor, and the irritating image. In general, these absolute metaphors are the ultimate adequate stylistic devices for a fragmentary reality and a world increasingly getting out of joint. As my colleague William Shakespeare used to say, the world is out of joint, and it did not mean that too few joints were being smoked. And since we are also commemorating my late friend Leonard Cohen, who followed his charming muse Marianne Elon only 3 months later, allow me to say that I feel obliged to give this little lyrics encouragement here, because I feel that my days are numbered too, just like every grain of sand. Therefore, my main intention is handing on the key and the wand of magic word, and to encourage every listener to write poetry himself, to realize the make it new principle, and to build the palace of newly discovered verbal jewels. For example, my favorite word, stardust. In these lines it even works without rhyme. And you went with me where the cornfields grow, through the fields of barley, and like stardust fell your blonde silken hair upon our fields of gold. Upon our fields of gold. And here's my warning. The day when humans stop to feel the magic of words and only limit themselves to cheap text modules, this day will be the end of poetry, of creativity, perhaps of all mental activities in general. As far as music is concerned, it is obvious that I love the US folk song tradition with its roots in the English and Irish songs and the Black 19th century blues. Many of my 3-chord songs follow this pattern, which was to become the basis of rock and roll, and I believe they're quite good. 20th century art has learned to be provocative. After 2 apocalyptic world wars, the days of the aesthetic and anesthetic 3-minute Dream Factory products in pop music are definitely over. Poetic beauty no longer comes with the golden tresses of a charming fairy. By the way, has Shakira ever sung any one of my songs? But in the silver splinters of a broken mirror. but it comes in the silver splinters of a broken mirror. And my unusual voice has been quite useful for this beauty at second sight. By the way, I do admit that initially rock music objects to the importance of my lyrics because it is very loud, very dominant, and always on the brink of overpowering my poetry. But on the other hand, rock music provides my lyrics with a certain energy, an intensity I would not like to do without. Think of songs like Knocking on Heaven's Door, All Along the Watchtower, or Like a Rolling Stone. They rock you, and that is their job. As far as poetry and music are concerned, I will be short. Poetry as a rhythmical art of words, started as lyrics, as song texts. Think of the Iliad, the Odyssey, or the Legend of King Arthur. They were sung, not spoken. And here I will not accept any objection that these are only old fairy tales that no one reads anymore. Think, for example, of The Lady of Shalott. It was set to music by a Canadian harp player woman and was a great international success. The lyrics were written by a 19th century English poet, but the plot of the long ballad, over 10 minutes, goes back over 1,000 years. It is one of the Arthurian legends. In other words, good poetry is timeless. It is beyond our everyday world, beyond time and place. This can also be seen in the fact that perfect poetry lines do not feel as if you had created them. They feel as if you had found them like diamonds on the ground, as if they had been there forever, waiting for you to find them. Or it can also be seen in the very strange fact that it can take quite a long time to find the perfect line. I remember one line which took me 11 years to find. But let us return to our central issue, poetry and music. By giving this prize to a singer like me, the Nobel Prize Committee has finally respected the fact that contemporary popular poetry is no longer read but sung. In other words, poetry has come home, and I feel honored having opened the door for it. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Colonians, I thank you for your attention and this prize.